Hey there, welcome to Hiker Homily, and this time we're going to talk about a kind of a subject that I know I always do a caveat on certain things. I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a this and that expert and this and that. Well, this time we're going to talk about a subject that I actually do know about. For 15 of the 20 years that I worked for the local sheriff's office, I was one of the department's first responder instructors as far as first aid and emergency things like that. So CPR, AED, first aid. I used to teach those courses to all the first responders in the department and things like that. So we're going to talk about hypothermia because you always hear a lot of hikers talk about, oh, you got to watch out for this for hypothermia, be careful for hypothermia, but a lot of us don't actually talk about what is hypothermia, what's it look like, how can you recognize that you're going into hypothermia or somebody else you're hiking with is having that kind of issue and things like that. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a little bit what hypothermia is and what it looks like and how to deal with it in this hiker homily, okay? So first of all, hypothermia is when your body's core temperature drops lower than it can handle, and so it starts doing things to shut itself down. Um, so it's actually surprising to a lot of people that it doesn't take much to start that process. Okay, normal body temperature is right around 98.6. Now, of course, human beings have a variance, right? So sometimes some people's normal body temperature is going to be 98.7, maybe almost close to 99. Some are going to be 98.4. Okay, right around 98.6 is normal body temperature for most human beings. Okay, for hypothermia, and the first thing I'm going to do, the one caveat I am going to give you is remember that everybody's body reacts differently to adverse situations. Okay, some people's bodies will be able to handle lower temperatures a little bit better than others, and so won't, you can't just like stick a thermometer in your mouth. Oh, you were at this temperature, that means you are this stage of hypothermia. It doesn't always work that way. So these are general ranges of temperature because people are different. Okay, so uh, uh, surprising as it is to some people, a drop to 96 to 94 degrees. So there it is, just a couple of degrees, your body temperature drops, you would be in the range of mild hypothermia. And by mild hypothermia, one of the first signs you're going to get, we're going to go over all the signs later, but the very first sign is shivering, which is actually a good sign because it means that your body heat regulation system is still working and trying to do something about this temperature drop, and that's what it does. Is it's shivering. The motion, teeth chattering, and things like that is the body vibrating like that. It's trying to produce heat in movement and things like that to try and control it. Now, as you progress through hypothermia, that's going to stop because what's going to happen is the body can't handle it anymore. Its heat regulation system tried, failed, and the core temperature has dropped more, and so it can't do anything. So the shivering will go away. So it's kind of confusing because if you take care of hypothermia right, they'll stop shivering as well, right? Yeah. So that's why you're going to have to monitor and watch. But yeah, mild hypothermia, you're going to get that shivering for sure. So 94 to 96 degrees, you're in the range of mild hypothermia. 93 to 90 degrees, moderate hypothermia. 89 to 86 degrees, you're in severe hypothermia. Your life at this point is very much in danger. Moderate, it's not looking great either. You've got to do something pretty much right away. But once you hit the severe hypothermia, you're in a lot of trouble. You need to do something immediately. And 85 degrees or lower, you are in what they call deep hypothermia, and more than likely, you're unconscious by that point, and it's going to be up to somebody else to try and help you, because it's an unconscious you may not come back from. Okay, so as we said, the first sign of hypothermia, especially when you've got mild hypothermia, is shivering. The other signs of hypothermia are going to be as follows, and remember, because everyone's different, this isn't a checklist where, oh, here's these things, but you don't have these two, so it's not hypothermia. That's not how it works. Not everybody is going to have every single one of these. maybe only a couple of them, maybe all of them, maybe half of them. Okay, people are different, so they're going to react differently to it. So you're going to look for all of these various things. If they have one or two of them after the shivering, good chance of hypothermia if the conditions are right. Okay, their skin's going to be very cold to the touch, possibly a bluish color. Pupils may get enlarged, slow and shallow breathing, mental confusion, memory loss, so they seem very, very confused when you're talking to them, or if you're experiencing it yourself, you're going to start having confusion. You're maybe even not remember, why am I out? Where am I? Where the heck am I? I don't even know why I'm out on this place. What is this trail I'm on? Okay. Coordination loss, stumbling steps, that can get dangerous out there on the trail depending on where you're at. You may fumble things with your hands because your body is moving itself. Things are getting cold, getting number, and it's hard to manipulate stuff. Your dexterity goes. Exhaustion, drowsiness, you start just getting really tired. You just can't go on. Slow, weak pulse. Okay. The final deep stage is unconsciousness, often with a pulse and breathing so weak that you can't detect it by the regular means. I mean, you'd need a doctor with a stethoscope to hopefully detect it, or maybe with the EKG means. But like doing the finger thing or listening for breath, you're probably not going to be able to detect it. That's how slow and shallow it gets when they're in that final stage. So just be aware of that. Now, and I said it in one other hiker homily when I talked about survival myths and things like that. Hypothermia is not just a winter thing. You do not have to be in the middle of a trail that's full of snow and camping in the wintertime with snow and things like that to just worry about hypothermia. Hypothermia is a 365 all year round issue that you have to watch out for depending on where you're at. Anything from getting wet with a very powerful wind. If you're crossing streams that are literally snow melt coming from higher elevations and it's very cold water, that's enough right there to drop your body core temperature 2 or 3 degrees, and you need to improve from that quickly. Otherwise, you're going to start going into hypothermia and things like that. So it's not just a wintertime thing. Hypothermia can happen in the summertime, springtime, fall, depending on the conditions. The biggest conditions that you usually see it aren't really snow. Most people, when they go to the snow and stuff, they go prepared with, the water resistant this and jackets and all the proper gear to try and keep themselves warm. And when they're hiking, they're moving and keeping themselves warm. It's usually the fall and the springtime that we get a lot of hypothermia issues, because people think, oh, it's not wintertime, it's a nice day, it's 72 degrees, great, and then they head out there, they do a river crossing or go swimming in a lake or whatever, and a little breeze kicks up, and there it is. They don't notice it right away. Next thing they know, they're sitting by the lake and they're shivering. Right there is the warning. Oh, I'm cold, I better get my dry clothes on, and things like that. And if they don't do that, things can progress from there. The body core temperature may continue to go down if they stay in the wind wet, and then they're going to get confused, things like that. So fall and spring are a big one, and it can happen in the summertime as well. And the other big thing is wet clothing. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people talk about the cotton is rotten. I did a whole hiker homily on cotton is rotten. Well, that's one of the reasons why it's hard, is because cotton, when it gets wet, stays wet for a long time. Now, if you have wet clothing on, I don't know what that was. Wet clothing on, it's wet, and then a breeze kicks up or something like that. That's going to bring your body core temperature down. You're going to get cold faster. That's why a lot of people like the material that wicks and dries quickly and pulls moisture away from your body, because that's helping you with with that getting cold thing. So you're going down the trail and you're starting to feel the effects of hypothermia. What do you do? Or you're hiking with somebody, or come upon somebody hiking and they're showing clear signs of hypothermia. What do you do? Okay, treatment for hypothermia is as follows. As soon as you can, you try and gently move them to warm, dry shelter if possible. Now, obviously, if you're out on a trail, that's easier said than done, but you got to do what you got to do. You're going to try and cover them somehow, and you're going to, if you have a thermometer, a lot of people don't carry that when they're hiking. I get it. Assess with a thermometer available so you can kind of know how bad things are. What is their core temperature at, or your core temperature at? Is it only a couple degrees down, so you're in the mild zone, or are we way down there and this is looking to get bad quickly? Okay, so assess if you can. If you don't have a thermometer, there's nothing you can do. Move on to the other stuff. You're going to remove any and all wet clothing. This is not a time for modesty, by the way. If you're with someone that you're hiking with, hopefully you're friends, and that's just the way it goes. But wet clothing is going to make it worse. The wet clothing has to go off. Hopefully you're hiking with people who have prepared and they have like other clothing with them, or an extra jacket. Like sometimes even when I'm day hiking on a beautiful day like it is today, I'll hike, but I'll still have a rain jacket just in case in my pack, because it doesn't weigh hardly anything, and I'm on a simple day hike, and just in case I get a little cold, I've got a windbreaker in there or a rain jacket to act as both or whatever. Okay, so if my shirt got all wet or something like that, okay, the shirt would come off. I'd put the jacket on after I've dried myself. It's nice and dry. Okay, that's going to help me and things like that. You're going to have to do the same thing with them. If you're actually backpacking and things like that, if you have dry sleeping bags or blankets available, you're going to want to get them in that as soon as possible. Make sure it's dry. Don't get them into any wet things. Hopefully everything, that's where you start getting into the dangers. You see the people camping, oh, I was this and that, and I had a leak in my tent and everything got wet. That's when you're in trouble. If you don't have any dry things, you're in trouble with hypothermia, because you need to get the wetness off of you. The wetness makes more cold. You need to get rid of that. You need to get into dry things as soon as possible. If you have like those hot packs available, I pack with them sometimes on cold days to keep my hands warm and things like that. You can help. You're going to want to put them around the neck, around the underarms, the inside of the thighs, the groin area, places like that. Do be aware, however, that those are sensitive areas, sensitive skin areas, and skin-on-skin contact with those can create burns. So don't keep them on there very long if you don't have a choice. If it has dry clothing, that helps, because then you're not having the skin-on-skin contact. But you're going to want to put them on those core areas, because you're trying to get the body core temperature here warm. Okay, if their hands are still cold, their feet are still cold, that's not as much of a concern if you're getting that core temperature back up. Okay, if you need to, and again, this is one of those times where the modesty is out the window. We're trying to save a life here. If you absolutely need to, if the person is in a lot of trouble and you don't have any other way to heat them, you get them in a dry bag, and your own body heat can help them. Make sure you don't have any wet clothing on. If your clothing is even slightly damp, that has to come off too. It used to be a joke at the camp I went to. We used to talk about, oh, hypothermia means you get naked in a sleeping bag with whoever you're hiking with. Hey, so-and-so, you want to get hypothermia with me? Ha 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 ha. Because we were young people. We thought that was funny when we were teenagers. But it is true. The time for silliness and nudity taboos and issues like that are over. You're saving a life. Think of it like that. And if that means you have to get into the bag using your own body heat to get them warm, it'll save a life. And you guys can laugh about it and be embarrassed about it later. But for that moment in time, you've got to put that childish stuff away and save a life. Okay? If the victim is awake and clear-headed, it's crazy we have to say this, but I used to have to say it all the time in the First Aid CPR classes I taught. If they are awake and clear-headed, and you can give them warm liquid, even if it's just warm water, it doesn't even have to be flavored, just warm water to sip. Don't have them chug it. Don't make it really hot. Warm. That's good too, because that helps get that in there into the core. Again, heating up the core body temperature. Do not do this if they are unconscious. It's crazy we have to say that, but we live in a world where chocolate bar manufacturers have to actually print on their candy bars, remove wrapper before eating. So we have to say, don't give unconscious people things to drink. Okay? So yes, if they are conscious and fairly aware and of what's going on, you can give them warm liquid to sip and things like that. Make sure the liquid is not an alcohol or has caffeine in it, because those will can make things worse. Alcohol can help dehydrate you. Caffeine is a vasodilator. That's just not going to work. So no caffeine, no alcohol, but yes, warm liquid if possible. Um, but really, the biggest thing for hypothermia, as I've said, is you've got to get them off the trail and into shelter. Sometimes, just if it's mild hypothermia, the best thing you can do at that point is turn around and head back to car or safety area where you can call for help, jump off the trail, whatever you have to do. And just the act of hiking will hopefully help keep them warm. But while you're doing that, you're going to monitor them. If they start doing the stumbling thing, acting confused, having the other signs that I gave you, okay, then this isn't working. You need to, build a shelter, do whatever you have to do to get them warm again, get that wet clothes off of them, things like that. Hypothermia. It can be scary out there, especially when you're way out there and you've got no help, but it is a possibility that we all have to get ready to deal with. And this is where I do a little pitch. If you're able to take a first aid CPR course, even if it's not wilderness first aid, I highly recommend it. Hikers really should know the basics. And even if it's not wilderness first aid, just knowing the basics to do, because in most first aid courses they teach you about heat related issues, they teach you about blood sugar related issues, a lot of stuff I'm going to talk about in future hiker homilies, just to have it there. But they talk about hypothermia and all the basics of what to look for. A lot of the stuff that I kind of put out in this video, that's what I used to teach in the first aid CPR classes. Okay, so if you're able to take one, I highly recommend it. It's an important skill for hikers to have, to recognize stuff like this, not just to know how to bind a broken arm or cover a cut or that kind of thing, but I mean just basic stuff like dealing with hypothermia. What does it look like? What do you do about it? Heat related issues, what does that look like? What do you do? First aid CPR classes, really important. That's hiker homily for this time. I hope you found this instructional. Hopefully it's helpful. This is one of those topics that, like I said, I actually can kind of pontificate about because I used to teach it for 15 or more years. I still know it a lot. It's an important part of hiking to know that kind of thing. So hopefully you found it helpful. Any comments, as always, down below. When I post it on Patreon, you can comment there as well. And again, my Patreon page right now is free. You don't have to actually give money. If you want to donate, that's fantastic. The money will go direct. I even stay on there. Any donations on my Patreon page will go into my hiking gear, hiking equipment like food, things to help do hiker homilies and things like that. It's not going to be going to me partying and buying stuff for the kids and things like that. Anything I make off Patreon, if you feel like donating, is there. But for the most part, Patreon is just a secondary place where I'm posting these things. In case something crazy happens with YouTube or whatever, I have another place where I'm posting these and things like that. So Patreon is there. You can get a hold of me, as always, at hikingforhealthca@gmail.com. And that's about it. As always, I thank you very, very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.